Hello, thank you very much for joining us today, Lindsay. Um, we are here with Lindsay uh, Tabas, founder of Labs. And Lindsay, I'd like to hand it over to you to give us a brief introduction. I know you have about 15 years of experience working in tech and startups. So if you could give us an idea of what you do.
Yep. Hi, Taya. Thank you so much for having me. So I started designing software in 2002, long time ago when I was studying engineering in college, and I just became obsessed with this idea of designing technology for people. I loved being a student. I stayed in academia and went to Berkeley for graduate school. So I started my career in the Bay Area. My education really systems engineering and human computer interaction. My career working full time, largely in startups, but also enterprise software, was as a product manager, a user experience designer, business analyst, user researcher. That part of any product team working really closely with software developers. And then I started as a consultant in 2014. That was my first year as an independent contractor. And then I founded Labs, which is product market fit for pre-seed startups in 2017.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and why you decided to become a consultant and start your own business?
Yeah, for sure. So when I went to Silicon Valley in 2005, I had a twinkle in my eye. I had huge, big startup dreams. Being an entrepreneur was always kind of in my heart and my chest. I was raised by two self-employed parents who were in turn raised by four self-employed parents, my grandparents. So I definitely had, if there's an entrepreneurial gene, I have it. Um, and so I always knew I wanted to start something and I wanted to impact a lot of people. But in my 20s, I worked full time. I hacked away on the weekends. I looked for tech co founders. I did what you would say is like the standard startup blueprint. I was in the top 5 of Women 2.0's business plan competition in 2008. I'm dating myself. I had stories about projects I created in NBC Bay Area and SF Weekly and even TechCrunch. So I did what the startup blueprint says that you should do to be successful. But unfortunately, I never was able to create a business with real impact, revenue, and something that afforded my freedom. Something wasn't adding up, but I stuck at it. I kept
Mhm.
working for other startups. They say you should learn what not to do. And so I kept at it because I just couldn't help myself. I made it my New Year's resolution in 2012 to not start a business, and I failed at that. I found
Mhm.
myself working in Haiti with some engineers on a really interesting toilet design. So yeah, I kind of always knew that I was going to be an entrepreneur and I was going to be self-employed and I was going to work on my own. And it took a kind of a meeting of a lot of different things that were happening in my life. First and foremost, I was working with a career coach who said, Lindsay, stop putting so much pressure on making your first business the most amazing, impactful business. Just start something. You know,
Mhm.
if you're really an entrepreneur, you're going to start multiple things in your life. So that was the catalyst for me to start One Squat Shop with a friend of mine. It was just an e-commerce store selling athleisure and athletic apparel. We started in 2013, just as that kind of wave and trend was going off. And it was something I knew, running an e-commerce store, drop shipping with partners, something I learned from my mom, who's been in the gift business for a long time. And then in order to keep working on that business, I decided to change from a really fast-paced startup to something a little calmer with a bigger company. And that was a temp to perm contract. So it was 6 weeks, supposed to turn to a permanent role. And unfortunately, we couldn't agree on employment terms at the end of the 6 weeks. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh my God, I don't know where my next paycheck is coming from. And so I hit the pavement for just a week, actually, talked to as many people as would talk to me. And I got a new contract. It was a 3-month contract with another design agency. And I looked around, I was like, oh, so this is how this works. This is how being a freelancer works. And so over my first year, I had a lot of really cool opportunities. I worked for Techstars EdTech Accelerator for 8 weeks, and that was really awesome. And I made it through the first year, and I looked around and said, hey, I've been doing all of my tech stuff in order to fund this e-commerce business, but e-commerce is really all just like digital marketing and they're not as interesting as the engineering and innovation stuff. And so why don't I go to what's actually making me money, which were my tech and design skills. So I kind of stumbled into it. There was no real big brave moment. I kind of got a kick in the butt from life that said, hey, it's time. And what really kind of kept me committed to it is I put myself in a situation where I felt like there were really no other options, to be honest. I had made it to about 32 years of life without knowing that I had ADHD. And when you're working full time and you don't have something like that diagnosed, you can get yourself in work environments that are really not very healthy for you. And so long commutes weren't really good for me. These open floor plan offices and startups weren't really great for me. So I kept finding myself really exacerbated in my late 20s and early 30s with the work environments. And when I finally set out on my own, I struggled to complete a lot of projects by myself. And the kind of hallmark traits of someone with ADHD really became far more exposed than they ever were before. And so after 2 years of being self-employed, I got diagnosed and realized that I needed to own my time and I needed to continue to build a life as a self-employed founder with flexibility and freedom so that I could afford myself an environment and a lifestyle that I worked well in. So
Yeah, that's something we share. Also have ADHD, and I work a lot in the neurodiverse space. I think it's very common for women to be diagnosed later in life because as children we don't present the same symptoms maybe as boys do.
no.
So yeah, it's a relief to have that diagnosis, and it seems like you've been able to really turn it into a successful venture with labs in your company.
I figured out how to make it sustainable and work for me. And my only advice to other people is, after getting diagnosed, that's when the real work begins because especially if you want to be self-employed and master of your own domain, uh, you lack kind of like a full-time job has these extrinsic motivators and accountability motivators that keep you kind of producing whether it feels good to you in your brain or not. And when it's yourself, and you need to be able to manage, I learned I needed to manage myself, manage my business, and manage myself as a business. And so, really, that first year after getting diagnosed, I took a lot of productivity courses and webinars, seminars in person to figure out what would work for me and how I needed to structure my day. And funny enough, I've ended up working a standard 9 to 5 like most people. I just make sure that I don't take any appointments until after 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. most days so that I have the morning to get the big stuff done for myself.
That's a great tip, like knowing when you're most productive in the day and kind of focusing around that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally relate to taking different seminars and quizzes and having the different coaches. I've gone the same path. So
Yeah.
very relatable.
Having someone that can help, like the therapist that I had also had an MBA. So it was really awesome because she kind of understood what I was trying to do with my business and what it was going to take to manage myself. And so she could also help me identify like new skill sets and productivity tips that I could put into place to help me manage.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I did want to talk a little bit more about your business. If we could go back to,
Sure.
I was really interested in your video on your website about product market fit, because I think you have a unique perspective on it. Could you kind of give us a background on your thoughts and how your vision is different than what we've been taught?
Yeah. So product market fit is this idea that there's some point in which your business and product align with a market and what the customers will pay for and want.
Mhm.
And the average response when I ask, a regular kind of practitioner in the product marketing and innovation space will say, oh, yeah, product market fit via maybe the net promoter score. The net promoter score being the how likely are you to recommend us from a scale to 1 to 10, right?
Mhm.
But a company can only manage or calculate their NPS score if they have a product in the market. Okay. So
Yeah.
let's put a pin in that. You can only measure product market fit by NPS if you have a product in the market. Put a pin in that, and now let me take you to this other thing that we know. 90% of startups fail. According to CB Insights, of the top 20 reasons startups say they fail every year, the number one reason is that they launched to no market need. Okay?
Mm.
So that means that they invested in building a product, they put it out there, and no one wanted it. And whomever they thought they designed the product for didn't actually want it. Usually, what that really looks like is someone puts whatever money they have into
Mhm.
building out their dream product, they launch it, and they very, very desperately would like to make that money back.
Mhm.
But they don't get as warm of a reception. They kind of didn't pay a lot of attention to audience building before the product was done. They waited until the product was done to reach out, and there's no one to buy their product. And now they don't have any of that money back, and they have to spend the next couple weeks, months, who knows how long, trying to figure out who wants their product. And very, very likely, there is not a perfect fit between their product and an audience, and they don't find it, and that's why they fail. And they say that the number one reason they failed is they launched to no market need. Launching to no market needs means you didn't consider the customer until the product was finished. If you can only measure product market fit by NPS, which means the product is finished,
Mhm.
then that's a lot of risk, right? That's a lot of risk to go from building a whole product and then measuring it. So, product market fit, in my opinion, cannot be some inflection point that we measure sometime later after we have a product. Product market fit has to be a continuous measurement of how well whatever your activities are right now for building your business are aligned with your audience. So at the very, very beginning of a startup venture, uh, the measure of product market fit, because I defined 7 benchmarks that are much smaller, the very beginning is just founder problem fit. Like, why you and why this problem? Because
Mhm.
also in the top 10 reasons startups fail is that uh, lack of passion. So if you don't have that passion for the customer and for the problem you're solving for them, then you probably shouldn't even get started on this route, right?
Mhm.
Then the next one is problem value fit. That the problem that you have identified is actually so painful to some group of people that they will pay you to solve it. And notice
Mm.
that these two fits, you don't need to invest in a product yet. You need to invest in really good customer and market research and development. So, product market fit is not an inflection point. We cannot afford to consider the customer later after we have a product because that's how most startups fail.
Mhm.
Rather, it's a measure of alignment and it's a continuous measure of alignment from day zero of you starting a venture. Okay.
It's I love your perception of this whole term, because to me it loops back again to this neurodiversity, because it's like everyone's in their bubble and they don't know what's on the outside of the bubble, so they're making all of these plans for a product that maybe isn't going to be successful outside of the bubble, right? So you're saying you need to reach outside and get some perspective. So what are some various ways that you do to kind of test the temperature?
Yeah, so this is actually what Labs, which is product market fit for pre-seed startups. It's a 6-month experience with a 12-week course plus community and coaching. But this is what Labs takes everyone through. Essentially, it takes you through the first 3 benchmarks of my innovation framework, which is founder problem, problem value, and then value prototype fit. So those first 3 fits. Uh, the types of things that we want to do, or instead of me going into the types of things we want to do, I have 2 quotes that I love that illustrate the philosophy that I have. Um, First and foremost, everything about Labs was designed by me to help startup founders design and sell the right product before they spend too much money building the wrong one, right? Because spending too much money building the wrong one sets you up for the number one reason most startups fail, which is launching to
Mhm.
no market need. So instead, this whole program is based on these 2 favorite quotes of mine. One from Einstein says, "Not that I'm so smart, I just spent more time with the problem." That's not the
Mhm.
exact words. It's something like, "I stuck with the problem longer," right? So
Mhm.
the majority of founders, and you can tell me, Taya, if this sounds familiar, is they experience a problem, they find a solution, they get excited about the solution. Eureka, by George, I've got it. We run to our friends and family to get their support. Our friends and family give us their support because they love and support us. And then we talk to a few strangers, log those as customer interviews, only listen to the feedback we want to hear, and then we bulldoze through product development. Again, that's the storyline, and most people do that, right?
Mhm.
So what this is saying is that when you experience what Einstein is saying and then how Labs is designed is like if you really want to innovate and you don't want to just put out another event or travel or food app that solves the problem the same way, you really
Mhm.
want to innovate, you need to stick with the problem longer. You need to look at it from a lot of different people's perspectives. You need to go in with the assumption that it's not just this surface level thing, that there's something a whole lot deeper is more interesting and important to solve for
Mhm.
a very specific audience. So the one quote is, it's not that I'm so smart, I just spent more time with the problem. The other quote is from Seth Godin, marketing author, all MBA founder, who said, "Don't find customers for your product," right?
Mhm.
So don't build a product and go find customers. Find products for your customers. So go
Mhm.
find customers, fall in love with these people whose lives you want to make better. And if you
Mhm.
fall in love with them and pay attention to them, then you will be able to figure out what products can help them. And that quote aligns also with this idea of maybe it should be market product fit, not product market fit, right?
Mhm.
That you should start with a market, you should start with a problem that you really just want to go away, and then evolve from there.
That's great. I really love I love that. And you know, as we're talking a little bit, I want to touch on just one thing before we wrap up, and that's this computer human interaction. I know you have specific ideas on that. Everyone's buzzing right now with AI and metaverse and all these things. So, what are you seeing? What is the kind of flow of how you see this going?
Yeah, so I love the field of human computer interaction. That is the field that I studied, my second year of college when I first designed my first interface was in a human factors and ergonomics class. So that's like the thing that I'm obsessed with. Uh, so here's what I will tell people because I've now, like, if you go from 2002, it's been like 20 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 2003, 2004, I'm in engineering school. I'm learning about Ray Kurzweil, the guy who's like thought leader, proposing singularity will become, one with the computers. And that was 18 years ago, 17 years ago. I'm sitting in my classes talking about genetically modified food in 2003 and nanotechnology. And in 2004, I spent a summer at Texas A&M in their industrial engineering department working on virtual reality applications. And then I drove myself nuts my entire career, or early first 5, 6 years of my career in the 2000s, trying to stay on top of like every new framework and every new coding language and blah, 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 blah. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's 2022. All right. Virtual reality, Oculus, yeah, like that stuff's it it's pretty it's relevant, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
cultural. Is it pervasive? Is it ubiquitous with with the entire world and the public? No, right? It's not as pervasive as the iPhone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, the point being is that these technologies take a long time to develop. So we might in this industry feel like this pressure to stay like hype on everything, like on top of everything that is like super popular.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is like the the middle of the bell curve, the average user, that takes such a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And again, to use the term, the reality is like I spent all this time trying to stay abreast of every new coding language and framework. And the best skill sets that I rely on technology wise to do my job are database design. Relational database design hasn't changed at all in 20 years. Object oriented programming. I mean, the actual languages have changed, but the logic hasn't changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, those two things help me more in working with technology than understanding how I used to insert JavaScript into virtual reality modeling language code and like design a manufacturing floor layout, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about, I'll start with AI. One, I've been reviewing startups on behalf of angel investors and venture capitalists for 5 years, and everyone throws AI in their pitch decks. And when I get down to like the brass tacks and interview the founders, AI is always on the product roadmap, but it's not actually like in the actual product right then and there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really crude and rudimentary if they have anything. They're just pulling on readily available libraries, right? So, and with the metaverse, I was interviewing a founder, a startup out of university here in Philadelphia. I do some pitch coaching for the students there, and he actually has a business been around for 2, 3 years that would likely put you in competition with a metaverse. And I just am staring at him. I'm asking, is like, this is Second Life, right? This is Second Life. You're talking about Second Life. Second Life was around 13, 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a Luddite by any means. I think my friend was talking about playing mini golf with his friend with an Oculus headset, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm finally kind of sold on this. But again, Ray Kurzweil's been talking about that since 2004, and there are people that are visionaries, and there are people that fashion themselves as visionaries and can see the future. But actual human behavioral change, that takes a long
A
time.
lot of time. I
So, like,
agree. Yeah.
yeah, it takes a really, really, really long time. So I don't think that I think the metaverse is more of like a PR distraction and a company strategy that may or may not happen, you know. But
Mhm.
I'm thinking we're thinking like a 10 to 20-year timeline. There's been people at IBM Research talking about how cool it'd be like in the early 2000s before the iPhone, like barely before the not even before the BlackBerry, people talking about like, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if you could stand in a random place in a national park and see what other pictures would be taken there?"
Mhm.
Okay, that vision occurred to someone in IBM Research in 2002.
Mhm.
We're there, right? Kind of, you
Yeah, we're
know?
getting there. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't, like, wave a wand and just see a screen pop up in the middle of a national park, but, like, we could go on our phone, and if we downloaded the right app or searched the right thing, we could
Mhm.
find other people's pictures from that spot. So, this is all to say that, most people actually don't care how their problem gets solved, they care that their problem gets solved and that their life is better. So whether AI or metaverse or, crypto is here to stay, NFTs, whatever, I learned to not get obsessed with that, I learned to get obsessed with people.
That's nice. I like that. That's really nice. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for your time today. And it's been really eye-opening to talk with you about these things. And you've definitely opened my eyes to a couple new ways to look at startups. So I appreciate that. How can people find you on the socials if they if they're looking to follow you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Lindsay Tabas on LinkedIn. I'm the only Lindsay Tabas. So just pop my name in and search me, add me. Make sure to include a message that you heard me on the show. That way I add you right away. Otherwise, you might get interrogated. You can find me on Clubhouse and Twitter at Lindsay T. So just like my website, Lindsay T. Instagram, it's Lindsay T Lady Engineer. So I'll just shout out if you want to learn about labs, lindsayt.com/labs. And every week on Clubhouse with the Startup Club at 4 p.m. Eastern, I take your questions on product market fit and customer research. So if you go to lindsayt.com/clubhouse, that will be whatever this week's event is. So you can
Okay.
also connect with me there.
Cool, cool. I'll put those links too in the comments section when I post the video. And Lindsay, something I ask every guest is your favorite book. So do you have a book you would recommend to our audience?
Can I give you two?
Yes.
Okay. So one is if you haven't read it yet, you should read Don Norman's Design of Everyday Things. That book will change the way you look at the design of everyday things in your life. Don Norman is one of the forefathers of human computer interaction, usability, and user experience. And it was assigned to me both as an undergrad and a graduate student. So you know that it's got high marks with the academics. And my second book is Reboot, Reboot by Jerry Colonna. Jerry Colonna is a well-known investor, and he kind of turned into a CEO coach and uh, kind of mindset leader. And
Mhm.
his book, Reboot, is just a must read for helping us as leaders and innovators to kind of get the gunk out of our heads and our hearts and our souls so that we can lead authentically, that we can create and innovate authentically and just be our best selves without wearing ourselves to a grind.
That sounds great. I'm going to check that out, and I'll link the books as well in the comments. So thank you again so much, Lindsay, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. It's been really great talking with you.
Thanks, Taya. I loved it.